Why was an entire hilltop carved, terraced, and fortified into a carefully aligned city, built to watch both the horizon and the sky, only to be abandoned within a few centuries? Xochicalco rises above the valleys of central Mexico like a quiet stone island. From below, the hill appears natural, its slopes softened by grass and scattered trees. But as light moves across its surface, geometry begins to emerge. Straight edges interrupt the contours. Terraces step downward in deliberate lines. Walls trace boundaries that do not belong to nature. The wind moves freely across the summit. Valleys stretch outward in every direction. Mountains rest along the horizon. From here, nothing approaches unseen. Nothing about this place feels accidental. The original hill was reshaped. Slopes were cut into platforms. Defensive walls encircled key sectors. Access routes were narrowed and controlled. The terrain itself became architecture. Before temples and plazas were completed, the mountain was transformed into a fortified foundation. Xochicalco stands in what is now the state of Morelos, positioned between major highland regions and lower valleys. This location offered visibility and connection. Trade routes passed nearby. Agricultural lands spread below. Seasonal rains filled surrounding basins. Yet the city chose elevation over ease. From the summit, the layout becomes clear. Plazas open across flattened terraces. Pyramidal structures rise at measured points. Ball courts sit within enclosed spaces. Causeways link platforms across controlled passages. The city feels layered, defensive, and observant. And then there is the sky. At the heart of the site, a carefully constructed cave descends into darkness. A narrow shaft opens above, allowing sunlight to pierce downward on specific days of the year. Light becomes a marker. Time becomes visible. Xochicalco was watching the heavens as closely as it watched the valleys. No written record explains why this hill was chosen. No surviving account describes its founding. The stone reveals alignment, strategy, and intention, but not motive. And so the question remains in the wind that crosses its terraces. Why build a city designed equally for defense and for the sky? To understand how Xochicalco functioned, the valleys below must be seen as part of its design. From its elevated terraces, the city overlooked fertile plains shaped by seasonal rainfall. Fields spread outward in shifting greens and browns. Small streams gathered during storms, then thinned under dry skies. Agriculture here depended on timing, storage, and careful coordination. Yet the city did not sit among these fields, it stood above them. Access to the summit was controlled through narrow paths cut into the hillside. Defensive walls reinforced vulnerable slopes. Entrances were limited and deliberate. Movement upward required intention. The hill was not simply a place to live, it was a place to secure. Within its terraces, space was organized with precision. Plazas opened in sequence, guiding circulation across levels. Ball courts were set into enclosed sectors, their walls echoing sound and shadow. Structures aligned along consistent axes, reinforcing visual order across the summit. Stone was cut and placed with measured care. Facades were decorated with carved reliefs depicting symbolic forms and distant influences. These carvings suggest connections beyond the hill itself, links to broader cultural currents moving through central Mexico at the time. Xochicalco was not isolated. It was positioned within a network of exchange. Water management also shaped the city's survival. Rainfall was captured through channels carved into stone. Cisterns stored seasonal runoff. Sloped plazas directed water away from foundations. On a hilltop exposed to erosion, such planning was essential. Every storm required preparation. And beneath the summit, the cave and observatory system continued its quiet function. As sunlight entered through the vertical shaft, it illuminated the interior walls in precise intervals during the year. This was not decorative, it was calendrical. It linked the city's rhythm to celestial cycles. Defense and astronomy were not separate features. They were woven together. Xochicalco guarded its height while measuring time itself. But such balance required constant maintenance. Terraces had to be reinforced. Walls had to be repaired. Channels had to remain clear. The hill demanded vigilance from those below and from those above. As Xochicalco matured, its summit became more than a defensive refuge. It evolved into a carefully staged landscape where visibility, movement, and alignment worked together. Each terrace opened onto another, creating a layered progression upward. Standing in one plaza, the next remained partially hidden, revealed only after deliberate passage. The city controlled not only access, but experience. At the center of this design stands one of its most striking structures, a pyramid adorned with carved stone panels. Along its sides, serpentine forms frame seated figures, arranged in rhythmic sequence. These reliefs are precise and deliberate. They do not overwhelm the structure. They anchor it. The carvings suggest connection to distant traditions across Mesoamerica. Symbols echo styles seen far beyond the valleys below. This hilltop city was aware of broader currents of knowledge and exchange. Materials found here, obsidian, shell, and fine ceramics, confirm long-distance networks. Xochicalco stood high, but it was not isolated. Its ball courts further reinforce this layered identity. Set within enclosed sectors, they combine ceremonial space with controlled boundaries. Sound would have carried differently here, echoing against walls. Movement within these courts followed strict lines. Even recreation reflected order. And then there is the observatory cave beneath the summit. On specific days, sunlight descends through the shaft above and traces a luminous path along the chamber floor. The effect is brief and exact, a moment of alignment between earth and sky. This was not a casual design. It required careful measurement of the sun's path across seasons. The hill became a calendar. Yet something about Xochicalco feels compressed in time. Its construction was ambitious. Its defensive measures were strong. Its astronomical features were refined. But evidence suggests that its peak lasted only a few centuries. Such effort, such precision, for a city that did not endure as long as others. Why invest so deeply in a fortified celestial hilltop, only for its momentum to slow? The terraces remain silent, but subtle clues begin to appear. In its later years, Xochicalco began to change in ways that were measured rather than sudden. There is evidence of fire in certain sectors, signs that some structures were damaged and later abandoned. Yet the destruction does not appear total. It feels localized, uneven, as though the rhythm of the city had already begun to weaken before flames ever touched stone. Defensive walls that once guarded narrow entrances show little sign of reinforcement in the final phases. Some terraces were no longer expanded. Drainage systems, so carefully designed, were not always maintained. On a reshaped hilltop exposed to rain and erosion, even brief neglect would have left marks. Regional dynamics may have shifted. Other centers rose in surrounding valleys. Trade routes that once passed near Xochicalco may have redirected. Political landscapes across central Mexico were changing during this period. A fortified summit that once offered advantage may have become less essential. And then there is the question of visibility. A city built to watch the valleys and measure the sun depends on stability, both environmental and social. If alliances fractured, if surrounding regions grew unstable, the hilltop could become isolated rather than protected. Elevation can offer control. It can also create distance. Over time, activity appears to have receded. Plazas emptied. Ball courts fell silent. The observatory cave, once aligned with sunlight, remained intact, but fewer eyes watched the beam descend through its shaft. The city did not vanish in a single moment. It thinned. Wind moved freely across unguarded terraces. Soil gathered in corners. Vegetation pressed against retaining walls. The carved reliefs endured, but their audience diminished. Today, Xochicalco still rises above the valleys of Morelos, its terraces clear against open sky. From the summit, the view remains expansive. Mountains rest on the horizon. Light moves steadily across stone. And so the question returns, why build a fortified city that watched both earth and sky, only for it to stand empty within a few generations? The remains suggest a place shaped by strategy, astronomy, and regional exchange, designed for a moment of transition in central Mexico's history. It may have flourished precisely because of instability elsewhere, serving as refuge, observatory, and crossroads. When that moment passed, the hill no longer held the same necessity. Xochicalco endures not as a fallen empire, but as a shaped mountain, one that once guarded its valleys and marked the passage of the sun. If this quiet exploration of Xochicalco has stayed with you, you're welcome to continue uncovering these ancient landscapes with us. And what do you think mattered more here? Watching the valleys below or the sky above?